Hello, friends. Back with you live for an on air recap of UFC Vegas 87, where we saw Jair Rosenstruck come in and stop Shamil Gaziev late in the fight, and some interesting corner work that was taking place at the end of that bout. You saw Mark Goddard step in and try to pin down Gaziev's corner to find out what was said in between rounds. And apparently, Shamil Gaziev was unable to see, yet his eyes were not closed. He was getting beaten to the punch, he was getting uh, outworked. And Gaziev, you saw, unable to get the takedowns early and often. He landed one takedown in the first round towards the end of the round, but wasn't able to do much with it. And Jair Rosenstruck, who's been a gatekeeper in the heavyweight division, shut that gate again on another up-and-comer here in Shamil Gaziev. I think that will be the one and done main event for Shamil Gaziev, who you got to wonder, how the hell did he get here? And I prefaced that on my morning breakdown show where he took on Greg Velasco as a massive favorite, came through there, and then won as an underdog against Martin Buday, and was not able to get through Jair Rosenstruck. So he's going to get bumped down the ladder, and you see the depth of the heavyweight division. The UFC was really trying to give Shamil Gaziev a push, and unfortunately, not as talented as some may have thought. And that was a big takeaway from this UFC Vegas 87 card, is that the UFC heavyweight division is incredibly thin. And at UFC 299, I tweeted this earlier today, the bantamweight division, I believe by far and away the most talent-rich division in the sport. If you have a different opinion, feel free to leave it in the comments section. But in my eyes, bantamweight, 135 pounds, Umar Nurmagomedov. We saw a fight last night, and he was dropped and caught as a massive favorite, but came out the other side victorious. But you have Sugar Sean O'Malley taking on Chito Vera. There is a litany of talent all over 135 pounds. So if you asked me for an ideal fight card, I'd love to see a all bantamweight UFC card. I know UFC Mexico City last week, the highest weight class we saw was 155 pounds. But if you booked a 135 pound UFC card, and the UFC has the stable of fighters to pull this off, sign me up. I'd fly to wherever that card took place. So that was an interesting main event. Then we also have the co-main event of the evening that we saw. That was Vitor Petrino, who, what can you say? He walked through Tyson Pedro, very tentative, tepid pace early. You saw the danger zone that Tyson Pedro was caught in, wasn't able to put himself in the fire. And that's what I was hoping for with a 1-unit play on Vitor Petrino to win inside the distance at -125. That line ended up closing around -150. That did not come to fruition, primarily because both of these fighters were tentative throughout the course of the bout. You saw how effective the jab was. And as Michael Bisping likes to say, the jab is the key to the door. So I was impressed nonetheless with Vitor Petrino. His arrow is pointed through the roof at 205 pounds. He's only 26 years old. So this is a fighter who's developing fight after fight after fight. Really looking forward to seeing where he ends up going from here. And he called out Anthony Smith. Vitor Petrino called out Anthony Smith. Big fan of that call out. I liked what I saw in there towards the end of the fight. You saw working for a head and arm choke. The fence was stopping Vitor Petrino from locking that in, but he was only a few seconds away of locking up a submission. And sometimes that's the way the cookie crumbles. If you're if you're hoping for an inside the distance play to cash for you. But within those 15 minutes, we saw some action, the much more powerful striker, Vitor Petrino, and he was stepping on the gas pedal late. You saw, I was impressed. I was impressed nonetheless, even though the card wasn't necessarily one of the better cards of the year. All right. Now, DX says current 135 is arguably the most deep division in the sports history, even outside of the UFC. I agree with you on that 100%. It's amazing how that roster or that division is so deep. Here's another fighter who really impressed me last night, Christian Leroy Duncan, who took on Claudio Ribeiro. And you saw new wrinkles to Duncan's game, the way he was able to establish mount on Claudio Ribeiro. Very, very impressive there, causing Ribeiro some fits against the cage. Ribeiro was shelling up against the cage, was caught multiple times at range and in tight. And then those elbows, raining down elbows by Christian Leroy Duncan. Very impressive. So arrows pointed up for Christian Leroy Duncan. Now let's talk about a situation where the arrow is pointed down for Javid Basharat in a fight that ended up being a very closely contested bout. Ayman Zahabi ended up coming out the other side victorious via, I believe, a 29-28 unanimous decision victory. And I got in on Basharat at minus 325 and minus 370. This line blew out. He closed over minus 800. I saw minus 1,200 or 1,100 at a book. And this was a big letdown spot for Javid Basharat, who was really checked at the door here. During the third round, you saw who had the better gas tank in that fight. It looked like Zahabi did. Zahabi was throwing with vicious intent throughout the bout. That right hand, he wasn't able to land it heavily on Basharat. Basharat took the first round. Second round was Zahabi's round. And then the third round, up for debate, but I also saw that the TriStar corner, and you could listen to them, Zahabi using the Apex crowd and the lack of a crowd to their advantage, being boisterous, being loud. And that's something you have to do. We saw Jair Rosenstrike also utilize that tactic as well. The ATT fighters and teammates and coaching staff who are getting loud for the judges, and they're humans just like the rest of us. So they do make mistakes out there. And so Basharat drops the ball here in a fight where he was a massive favorite, and he had a huge age discrepancy. Also had been the more active fighter, Basharat. And Zahabi is a fighter who you wonder what could have been. He's in his late 30s. He has a few nice wins under his belt now. And Basharat, arrow pointed downward. Let's talk Ludovic Klein taking on AJ Cunningham. Now, one of the plays we talked about on the morning breakdown show was the under 1.5 here that was potentially in play, and it ended up cashing. But AJ Cunningham took the damage, took the kitchen sink. He was getting lit up in the body, up top. Ludovic Klein attempting head kicks, but picking AJ Cunningham apart. And Cunningham took the fight on such short notice. And after getting brutalized by that, who are they going to give AJ Cunningham next time out? Who's a cupcake matchup for AJ Cunningham up at lightweight? Or even down at 145 pounds. Tough spot, tough look. And you want to talk about earning another UFC fight. One way to do it is to get your ass kicked brutally. And that's what happened in a short notice debut, which is kind of sad the way it has to work like that. We'll talk about another fight where a similar beatdown took place, and the Vinicius Oliveira Bernardo Sopaj. So the Sopaj fight, Sopaj came out on short notice and was getting the better of Vinicius Oliveira. And you and I, we both saw what took place there. Oliveira looked like he got a second wind after being grounded and grapevined and flattened out on the mat. But what ended up happening, he did not give up on himself. And the short notice replacement fighter, Bernardo Sapai, ended up gassing out, had nothing left at the end of the second round. The corner did not throw in the towel. I was expecting, well, it's very rare, but I was hoping that Sapai's corner was going to throw in the towel. They ended up not doing that. Everything you got, everything you got. They say it's tough for a fighter who's completely gassed out and has nothing left to give it more. And you saw Vinicius landing the leg kick to chop Sapai down and then land that flying, well-timed knee against the fence to put Sapai's lights out. Now, how much life does that take out of such a confident fighter in Bernardo Sapai? I'm very, very, very concerned for the future of that young fighter who, yes, he may be cut from a different type of cloth, but also to know that you were brutally knocked out under the bright lights and this was your shot. And also his ankle. He was helped out of the octagon. I'd like to see what ended up happening as far as his injuries go. Tough, tough, tough spot for Sapai, who came in on short notice and came up short. And you could tell he's a very, very talented fighter out of Sweden. So sad state of affairs, but that's the sport. That is the sport. The brutality of this sport is also what makes it so beautiful, because you have to crush another fighter's dreams to accomplish your own. And we see it time and time again on the highest level, in front of thousands of people, or in front of the apex. It happens time and time again. Tim Means had mentioned it in his pre-fight and post-fight speeches that it's your dreams or his. And we saw what happened here. Sometimes the fighters end up paying with their consciousness or having to take brutal beatings, and also dish out brutal beatings to become victorious and secure their destiny and their dreams. So that's what makes this sport so great. And it's what makes this sport so much different than every other sport. In basketball and football and hockey and baseball, in soccer, it does not play out like this. The stakes are not that high from a physical standpoint. And Vinicius Oliveira, very impressive comeback. The second wind that he showed us there was something that I did not expect. I thought that he was going to get finished, and he ended up turning the tide there, made his way back to the feet and dished it out. So, wow. Jordan says, finally, 299 fight. We can't wait to hear the discussion this week. Yes, I'll be putting out a multitude of videos throughout the week. So stay tuned into the channel and look out for videos throughout the course of the week. Let's talk some other matchups. How about the first fight of the night? Abdul Karim Al-Salwadi, who took on Loic Rabzadov. And Rabzadov was tough as nails. The longer the fight went, he did not care what Zalwadi was doing in front of him. You saw him plodding forward, and Zalwadi was having his moments throughout that fight. It looked like Rabzadov was gassing out, and then a heavy shot landed by Rabzadov, and Al-Zawadi ended up taking significant damage on the mat. After the fight was ended, you saw Zawadi try to work his way back to the feet with the help of his cornerman, and even then, he didn't have all of his wits. So Rabzadov, I think he's fade material moving forward, depending on the opponent, of course. But I do not hold Rabzadov in high regard. And Zawadi, it just goes to show you, it takes one or two strikes to change the complexion of a fight. And he got hit, he got caught, and that was it. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in this morning. I appreciate you. Let's talk a few other matchups. Let's talk Eric Anders, who was a massive favorite, and he was within one or two strikes of getting finished by Jamie Pickett. That's a reality. Jamie Pickett was announced his retirement in the lead up to this bout, and Eric Anders sent him out to pasture. Eric Anders also, I am surprised to not see him hang up his gloves after this fight, because Anders looked even more slow and plodding than we've ever seen. He's getting caught and dropped and almost finished by Jamie Pickett. He got stung and caught multiple times. Eric Anders did. And as far as I'm concerned, I'm watching Eric Anders. He's continued to regress. Even in victories, he's continued to regress. So interesting to see where the UFC decides to go with him. The other thing is, he's not an exciting fighter anymore. He's not a fighter where he's going to march forward, try to secure a takedown against the fence, and then rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. He's slow, he's plodding. And if you're planning for him, he hasn't evolved at all. So interesting. So Anders ends up cashing for folks in a fight where he looked as bad as he ever has, and not much great things to say in regards to Eric Anders there, but he does have a motor on him. I will say that he doesn't give up on himself. He will keep going until the end. And you watched the Thiago Santos fight that took place in Brazil. That showed me the heart that Eric Anders has. He has heart for days. Now, you want to talk about a fighter who has heart for days, Matt Schnell, but his body, unfortunately, has given out on him many, many, many times, and it did so again last night. There's a video that was posted today of Taglioni, the referee, who ended up confronting and consoling Matt Schnell. He said, I don't know if it was the punch or your head bouncing off the canvas, but that was a powerful, powerful shot. And Steve Erceg, man, this kid's legit. I had the largest play of the evening, 3 units on Steve Erceg at -300. By the way, we beat the lines on just about every play out there and ended up having a little over a 1-unit loss last night overall. And the Basharat performance was the one that sealed the losing night for me. But it was we lost that play, and then also the Petrino inside the distance. But we cashed on Steve Erceg -300, risking 3 units, and he looked the part last night. We didn't get to see much of the action on the ground, but on the feet standing, very impressive from Steve Erceg, who stood in the pocket. He took some heavy shots from Matt Schnell. It was interesting. Schnell would get hit and then he would react. It was so strange to watch that unfold. He would get cracked and then he would react almost as if he was trying to slip a punch after it landed. Did anybody else catch that? That was really, really odd. And Schnell, shop worn at this stage in his career, at his mid-30s. I think that is the last we see of Matt Schnell in the UFC. A very exciting fighter. But man, he sacrificed so much of himself throughout the course of time. The other bet we hit last night was 1.5 units on Leroy Duncan at -225. Leroy Duncan ended up closing at -375. So CLV closing line value across the board, but that doesn't necessarily guarantee you a winning night. And there are no guarantees in this sport. That's one thing that is for sure. There are no certainties in this game. Now, you want to talk about no certainties in this game. You look at Umar Nurmagomedov, who got flattened by Bekzak Almakhan, and look at the number that was in front of us there, -1,200 for Umar Nurmagomedov. He got dropped, but what you saw out of Umar Nurmagomedov was he went right back to his bread and butter, his wrestling, and that ended up saving his fate. And you saw how much of a difference maker that is. Always bet on cardio, and then also, the wrestling heavy fighters who have elite wrestling, which Umar does, that was a difference maker. And I'll be interested to see where Bekzak Almakhan goes from here, because he showed us that he was willing to hang in the fight, that he has hands and he can throw kicks. But when you're fighting such an elite opponent, this is a fighter in Umar who folks have been avoiding for a long time. People do not want to fight him because it's hard to look good against Umar Nurmagomedov. When you're on your back and your game is completely stifled, it's tough to create a highlight reel. So Nurmagomedov comes through. Then we talk about Muhammad Makayev, who did not look good against Alex Perez. I was pulling for Alex Perez. I knew this was a fight where Perez was going to be game, and he was. He took a shot to the body that almost folded him up, but he ended up turning the tide and couldn't do anything after he had the front choke available. There were a multitude of attempts that he could have tried, and he was in a position where literally minutes were taking place with a front choke just waiting in front of him, but he didn't try to latch anything up. I believe there was a ninja choke against the cage that he was attempting, but other than that, Makayev, squirmy, going back to his wrestling, and didn't show me much improvement. Muhammad Makayev still up for debate. I do not believe he's a top flyweight. He's still only 23 or so years of age, so he's got a lot of room for growth, and I think he needs to just I think he needs to relax as far as calling out big names in the flyweight division. 125 pounds. Yes, he's undefeated. Yes, he has a solid amateur record, unblemished. But this kid, 23 years of age, he's got the arrows pointed up. I don't believe he's a top flyweight right now. He still needs some room for development. So if you have any other comments in the comment section, please feel free to chime in. We talked about every fight on the board that took place, all 11 bouts. And remember to go get what's yours. Have a great Sunday. We'll see you back at UFC 299. Look out for additional videos throughout the course of time. LP, good to see you. Take care and have a fantastic rest of your day.